this session is being recorded, and at the end, we will have PowerPoint slides for you, as well as a little bit of information about some of our upcoming events and webinars, including our own CLET World Languages Conference. And so stick around for more information on that. And now I'd like to introduce you to my colleagues who will be hosting the event for today. We have Rosie Freeman, who will be introducing our speaker, and we have Christy O'Connor, who will be running the Q&A later in the session. So a big welcome to them. Thank you so much, and I will hand it off.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kamala. And hello, everybody. Hola, guten Tag, hallo, and bonjour. My name is Rosie Freeman, and I am one of the program consultants here at CLET World Languages. Our CLET World Languages webinars offer us the opportunity to support our language teaching community here in the United States and abroad. One approach throughout all of our materials is the communicative approach to language. It's also widely used by teachers teaching all languages, including myself as a Spanish instructor for many years, we won't say. Working in pairs is a part of this methodology. And in an effort to help gain insight on this topic, we are delighted to present a specialist in the field of second language teaching. Lindsay Clandfield was born in the UK, grew up in Canada, started teaching, and got married in Mexico. He now lives in the south of Spain. He is an author of books for teachers and learners of English. Lindsay has won numerous awards for his work, including the Ben Warren International House Award, the Duke of Edinburgh English Speaking Union Award. Lindsay was the lead author of the critically acclaimed course Global by Macmillan, an adult course for learners of English with a critical angle and a focus on English as an international language. His most recent course for language learners is Studio by Helbling Languages, and he co-wrote the books Interaction Online by Cambridge University Press and Live Online Teaching by Pavilion Publishing with Jill Hadfield. Welcome, Lindsay. Hola.
Hola. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I'm coming through all right? Good, good. Anyway, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you to CLET World Languages for inviting me here today. I'm joining you from Spain, where it's just past midnight, actually. So I'm delighted to see you all here. Hello, hola, guten tag, bonjour. The talk that I'm going to be giving today is on the topic of pair work in language teaching, and it should be applicable to all foreign language teaching, all language teaching that we are all engaged in. So it's not, my specialty is in the area of English language teaching, but these ideas should be portable around for other languages as well. Just as we're getting started here, can people, I'm seeing people saying hola and halai and so on. Can I just get an idea of what languages people are teaching? Can you type in the chat box just as we're getting warmed up here, like Spanish teacher, or I teach German or English, or, okay, lots of Spanish, German, Spanish, Dutch, French, excellent. German, Spanish, oh, well, I could have almost dar la conferencia en español, but that's okay. I'm going to be giving it in English, so it's for everybody here. But I'm thinking that many of these ideas will be portable for you as well. Okay, let me just begin by sharing my screen here. Okay. And call the chat back up, so we should have, everyone can see here. So the topic today, the title is Two's Company or Two's a Crowd, ? So I had long been wanting to give explore the whole area of pair work in language teaching, because I think when we begin as language teachers, when I learned Spanish 30, 40 years ago, when I was a child in Canada, I had Spanish lessons. We didn't do that much pair work. In fact, we did hardly any at all. It was all very much listen and repeat what the teacher said. When I became an English teacher, I also learned English teaching and learned the communicative approach. So I started doing much more pair work in my language teaching as a teacher than I had done as a learner. And I see that in many language teaching classes, pair work, group work is now, for the past 20 years at least, and in some cases far more, a very normal part of language teaching. So normal that it's almost taken for granted. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a little while. But one thing that I thought is curious is that from being a teacher for so many years to becoming a writer of materials and then a teacher trainer, I noticed a strange thing. I would go to workshops. I would give workshops to groups of teachers, like 20 teachers, 30 teachers, 100 teachers, all knowing the communicative approach, who all do the communicative approach, I presumed, with their learners. And when I would say to them at the beginning of a workshop, okay, everybody get into pairs, I'd like you to do a work in pairs, some teachers would go, or roll their eyes, or sort of look around somewhere else, like they didn't really want to work with the person next to them. So kind of one of my opening questions here was, why was it that some teachers, not all, some teachers disliked pair work in workshops? So that got me thinking, like, if we are all supposed to be communicative language teachers and we ask students to do work in pairs and in groups and so on and so forth, why is it that some of us as participants in workshops might not like to do pair work that much? Here, just tell me in the chat, if you're someone in a workshop or when you were a student in class, did you like pair work, yes or no? Not as teachers. I imagine as teachers you maybe, sometimes same reasons, sometimes, yep, people disliked it or liked. I guess a yes means you liked it, that you were okay with it. Not much, some of them. Sometimes it was okay, excellent. Depends on the partners and on the subject matter. And here's where we're coming to it. Okay, good. So why would teachers not like to do it? And why do students not like to do it? And why do some teachers not like to do it? And I think I'm going to touch on something that Elizabeth Landers has just said in the chat, that we're in a workshop is different in the classroom. Couple of things here. I've asked many teachers these questions and sort of started drilling into why people might not like to do it, or as a student or as a teacher. So for some, it's considered like a bit of a waste of time. I think, as one person said, maybe it's different in a workshop than in a language class. In a workshop, you want to maybe hear what the workshop presenter wants to say, and you're there for that reason and not to waste time talking to somebody else. For some teachers, let's say more traditional teaching, pair work is a waste of time because students don't always know what they're doing, or the teacher feels they have so much material that they have to say that it would just be lost time for students to do it. Another argument that some students had made to me when I asked them, students that didn't like pair work, they said, well, we do pair work so often in our language classrooms. We're always doing pair work for everything. And so maybe is pair work overused in the language classroom? Someone in the chat wrote, it depends on the partner. And this, I think, comes to the idea of interpersonal problems. So here, especially if you're teaching younger students, so-and-so does not want to work with the other person, or if you're always working with the same person, you maybe don't get along with them after a while, or if you're always moving around, meeting new people, maybe you just don't like working with other people that much. Maybe you're more solitary. So sometimes there can be interpersonal problems. Sometimes people don't like pair work because it's unclear what to do. I've certainly watched language classes where the teacher gives an instruction and says, now in pairs, something very vague, like talk about it, talk about the text. And the students look at each other and are not really sure what to say. They don't know how to get started. So there's a bit of an awkward silence. And then turns them off pair work. Occasionally, it can be that the task that they're asked to do leads to awkward questions, which could lead to a loss of face. I'll give you an example of what I mean. I was once at a workshop in a conference where we had to begin the workshop by turning to our partner and saying a time where we felt that we had failed. And I didn't know my partner at all. I had met them never. So turning and sharing something kind of personal like that, like a time when I had failed something, felt strange and it felt a bit awkward. And I think for some students in language classes, when we're getting them to personalize things, there can be a loss of face if they don't have the comfort of knowing their partner better. Finally, many teachers don't like pair work because it's hard to control. It's easy for things to get noisy, the noise levels go up, etc., etc. So you might think from all of this that I'm anti-pair work. That's not true, because I think there are some very good reasons to do pair work. As one teacher has put in the chat here, Claudia said, you have to give very clear instructions to make it work. And I think any of us who teach with a communicative approach will believe at least in one or more of these things. For the language teacher, pair work is seen as very important because it increases student talking time. So if the students are talking in pairs, they're multiplying the amount of time they're talking as if they just spoke one at a time, with the teacher asking a question, the student answering. There's an idea that for brainstorming activities, for trying to figure out puzzles, answering questions, having discussion, that two heads are better than one. So talking to somebody else will help open up other solutions to a problem. It can give the learners greater independence. So the teacher will sometimes do pair work, encourage pair work so that the students learn to do things by themselves and ask each other, not always depend on the teacher for the right answer. Curiously enough, pair work can be useful for the teacher to assess individual work. So when I assign pair work, I can walk around the classroom and listen in to students, or I can maybe work with one student, while pairs are doing something. If there's one student or a couple of students I need to check on something, I can help them. So a weaker student might get a little bit of personalized attention, or I can detect what's going on. So curiously, pair work can lead to assessment of individuals better. It promotes cooperation, which is, we'll come to that point in a moment. And finally, for many teachers, language teachers especially, there's a whole theory of learning, a socio-cultural theory of learning, that says that people can learn from each other. They don't just learn from the teacher. That people working together at similar levels of competence can learn from each other. So any one of these reasons are good reasons why we may do pair work. What's interesting, I'm going to share with you things from books here, how pair work has become more and more prevalent in language classrooms. These are from English language course books. I took one from 1967 on the one side of the page there, the black and white page. You'll see that this is from a student book. There's no instructions at all, and much less any instructions to do in pair work. In fact, if you were looking at this as a student, you were not really sure what to do. I suppose you look at the instructions at the bottom and then make questions, and the teacher maybe gives an instruction. I presume also that the students are either doing this all together, the teacher and then the students answering and so on, but there's nowhere in the book where it says do this in pairs. Compared to a 2020 book, where you see there's like vocabulary where it says work in pairs. There's another one, work in groups. There's work with a partner, work in groups. And I see this also in other language course books where there's the instruction for work in pairs is very common. We do pair work in all kinds of things. We do pair work mainly for speaking. Pair work can get done for language work as well. So like, they do a language exercise in pairs to check their answers together. pair work has been introduced into reading activities for students to read and answer questions to the reading together in pairs. There's writing activities where the students write to each other in pairs, or they do writing brainstorming together in pairs. Listening can even be done, like compare your answers with a partner and so on. It's so frequent that as a coursebook writer, as a materials writer, I often found that I was trying to vary always writing work in pairs. So I'd write work with another student, work in groups of two, A and B, work with a partner. And my most common typo as a writer on teaching materials is I often write work in pairs so quickly that it comes out as what you see in red there, work in Paris. And I've even seen that get into print into a book, in a first copy of a book where it said work in Paris instead of work in Paris. So it's really, really common, at least in English language teaching, but I think in others as well in our materials. Interesting to think about I want to mention two activities that do use pairs, that use pair work, that became very classic activities in language teaching. First in English language teaching, but I think they've spread to others. The first is the idea of the jigsaw. A jigsaw activity is an activity in pairs or groups where, for example, in a reading, each student has a different part of the reading. So like I have part A and somebody else has part B. We have to read and then come together because the questions are about the whole text. What I found very interesting about this is I found from my source is Jason Anderson, who has this great blog called Speaking Games, where he looked at the history of this activity. And it interestingly comes from the United States, from Austin University, where the teachers, it was at the beginning of desegregation in high schools in the United States. They wanted to move the students, to force them to work together and to make it not competitive. So they were desegregating classrooms, classroom becoming multiracial, and they wanted the students to work together, not competing against each other. So they devised this cooperative jigsaw structure that they called about the life of Eleanor Roosevelt. They divided students into small groups, diversified in terms of race, ethnicity, and gender, and making each student responsible for a specific part of the biography. So that was an example of the earliest way that it was called a jigsaw activity. So origins in Austin University: create a more cooperative activity used with fifth graders, integral to desegregation, and it was more about peer teaching and interdependence than language work. And it was eventually picked up in English language teaching for listening activities in the language lab, where students would listen to different bits of things in different booths in the lab and then work together to answer questions. We can see the Google Ngram for the word jigsaw classroom goes up from 1970s up into the 90s, where it's becoming quite frequently used. The other kind of activity was the information gap. In an information gap activity, this was more specifically designed for communicative language teaching. In fact, it's one of the big communicative language teaching innovations in methodology. The information gap was that each student had different information. Here's an example from a 1980 book called Pair Work, where student A has one booklet and student B has the other booklet. And they each have different information. And the instructions are they have to kind of work together without showing their paper to each other to put those bits of information together. So if ever you've done one of those activities in your course book, that's where it kind of came from, this idea of an information gap. So information gap was originally from the mid-1970s, primarily used in language classrooms, was one of the first kind of communicative activities. Their first book that was explicitly called Pair Work in English language teaching is 1978. And by 1979, it was seen as a central technique of communicative language teaching. So lots of use of this technique. And it's still used today. And there we see the term information gap in rising in like a word, in word frequency in papers and so forth. Finally, to bring it up to modern day, the idea of students working together in groups or in pairs is now seen in modern language teaching as essential and as important skills, in fact, to learn. The Common European Framework, document which has become very important across foreign language learning for lots of different languages. Many of you know maybe for the levels, A1, A2, or the can-do statements. The other thing that the most recent addition to the Common European Framework states is they've introduced two new skills that can be measured. One is interaction. So that's obviously requires students working together, seen as central. So they talk about spoken languages, essentially interpersonal, collaborative, and transactional. And also they talk about mediation, where a learner is acting to create like a bridge to another learner to convey meaning, sometimes within the same language, sometimes from one language to another. So I won't dwell too much on these because I want to get to practical activities, but this is reinforcing the social cultural view of language learning, that learners need to kind of interact with each other to help learn language better. Okay. So that was our theory part of it. What I'd like to move now into is 2 or 3 parts of the talk where I want to talk about practical activities, practical tips and strategies, as well as activities that you can do to spice up your pair work, both in the face-to-face classroom and in the online classroom, because I've been teaching a lot, and I imagine many of you have had to teach online during the past 2.5 years, especially. And we'll look at things that how pair work can be done online. The first thing, though, I want to share are things for students in the face-to-face classroom. Doing pair work effectively for me as a language teacher, when I started off, is I wanted to get off to a good start with pair work. So that meant moving students around on the first day. So if I let students just stay in their places for the first class, second class, third class, it was really hard for me then to say, now work in pairs. Whereas if I asked them from day one, okay, first activity, work with a partner, get together. Using it from the beginning of course, it was easier for me to continue giving them pair work. I also would do what I would call low risk convergent pair work activities. A convergent activity is where like it's all going to focus on the same answer or something quite simple. So asking a very open question like, what things do you like, is divergent. So, and it's harder for students, especially if they don't know each other. They've got to kind of think, translate, how much do I trust the other person? Things like, think of 3 things that are green, make a list with a partner, and then that's more convergent. You're converging on like this, there's a limited amount of things, and it's lower risk. So also I would not use highly personalized or potential loss of face activities with the new groups. Other ways that people have organized planning lessons around pair work. One way that is frequently used in American universities is the Think, Pair, Share. Have anyone heard of Think, Pair, Share? Have you done Think, Pair, Share as a student, perhaps, or even as a teacher? Yeah, so it's rather simple. You set a task, you tell students, think about it, then they get together and they share. Yeah. Another one that I've seen, and I've written about before as well, is where you have classrooms where there's a screen at the front of the classroom, like a whiteboard or interactive whiteboard or something, is that you organize your class so that some elements of the class are heads up. Some parts of your lesson are heads up, where the students are watching you or the board or doing something heads up. Other parts where heads down, they're doing work by themselves, writing in their course books or doing an exercise, and then heads together where they turn to each other and they talk to each other. So again, that's a way of labeling your lesson, to have a balance of heads up time, heads down, and heads together. Putting students into pairs. So there are 2 ways that you can put students into pairs. I think you can do it non-randomly, where the teacher kind of decides things, and then randomly. So non-randomly, obviously the easiest is asking the person to work with the person next to them. Some teachers, it's a bit harder, I know, but some teachers like to try to pair a stronger learner with a weaker learner. So you have a strong, like you deal with your mixed ability there. Sometimes you pair students who are the similar age, or if you have a multilingual class, you pair students maybe with the same language, or you separate the ones with the same language so that they don't speak their own language. Some teachers say that they pair together the less disruptive student with the more disruptive students. So you don't want the two bad students kind of getting up to trouble together. So you separate them off. Randomly, pairing students randomly, one very easy way is sort of like where the teacher goes like let's say there's 12 students in the class. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The ones work together, the twos work together. So you just kind of count like that, and then they get into groups. Teachers of younger learners will sometimes get students to stand up and get an order of their birthday, or an order of height, or an alphabetical order of their first name. And then they say, the person next to you is your partner. Sit down with a new partner. I had a colleague in Spain who used a deck of cards. He always had the deck of cards with him in class. And then he would select the amount of cards so if we had 12 students in class, he'd pick out 12 cards, which had a mixture of pairs or groups. He'd deliver everyone a card. He'd say, you need to find your partner. So if you're a 2, you need to find the other 2, or you're a king, you need to find the king. Or then you could reorganize into groups. Find the spade, and now you get into a group of 4, and so on. The other one, which is kind of fun, is putting names together. So by names, I mean like two things that go together. So I had a set of index cards where I had, like, for example, Batman, Robin, or I can't remember some of the other ones. Like I had things like knife and fork, bread and butter, thunder and lightning. And so I dealt those out, and then people had to walk around with their card and find their partner. So if you're a fork, you have to find knife. If you're Batman, you find Robin. If you're Mickey Mouse, you find Minnie Mouse. And then that was your partner. So it was randomly. Another thing is getting up and find something you have in common. So find somebody who has the same shoe size as you do. Find someone who likes the same books as you do. And then that's your partner. And then one of the most magical ways that I saw was at a workshop where the teacher at the workshop had put stickers under the chairs, and they would be, each sticker would match with another one. And so when she said time to get into pairs, she said, look under your chair, there's a post-it note, take that, and now find somebody else with the same post-it note. And everyone was like, wow, it was a kind of magic moment, and everyone sort of was quite excited to get into pairs after that. So that's another nice way of doing it. Another one that I saw was really good, as again, if you're doing face-to-face, we'll talk about online later, is organizing the classroom into circles. So if you're able to move the chairs, one circle outside the other, and chairs in each circle is facing each other. So the inner circle is facing the outer circle. The students sit in the chairs and begin their pair work activity with the person in front of them, but the outside circle moves and the inside circle stays put. So you just have like an outer ring moving around, and that's a new partner each time. I like to do that for activities where several people have to you have to interview people, for example, 3 or 4 questions, and then interview someone else. One problem that lots of teachers have had, of course, is what happens when you have an odd number of students. So sometimes the teacher says, well, I'll work with the extra student, or you put a group of 3. So very obvious thing. If you're doing a group of 3, one thing that I discovered when I was doing some teacher training, we decided that if we ever had a group of 3, we would set the group of 3 first. So the teacher would put the group of 3 first and then put everybody else into pairs. I'll tell you why. For example, I can't see you, but if we were all in a classroom together and I said, you 2 work together, you 2 work together, you 2 work together, you 2 work together. And at the end I say, oh, there's 3 of you. Okay, so can you, Maria, just work with Anatolia and Claudia? All of a sudden now Maria feels like, oh, I kind of wrecked the activity. I'm the extra person I'll work with in a group of 3. Compared to Maria, you are going to work with Anatolia and Kathleen. Now, you two work together, you two work together, you two. It suddenly seems like this was part of the plan, that the teacher had always imagined that it was going to be like this. That I need a group of 3 and then the rest of you in pairs. So it doesn't make that group of 3 feel like they are the odd one out, if you see what I mean. Okay, oops, I'm going to skip over here. Wanted to move on to a couple of activities because I'm aware of how much time is going here, and I know there'll be questions at the end, so I want to give questions. So those were some of the kind of what I would call hacks on doing pair work. The only other one which I didn't mention, which is on one of those slides I went back quickly, is sometimes I would actually physically make the students turn to face each other. Because one thing I noticed, if I asked them to do a speaking in pairs and I didn't, they might kind of sit like this next to each other, like they'd be sitting talking like that. So I would tell them, with one group of teenagers who were notorious for doing this, I said, now when we do a pair work activity, you have to do speaking stations. And the speaking stations meant that they had to physically turn their chair like this and then talk to their partner. So that, or the speaking stations was getting them to stand up, like the 2 people you see in the picture here. Here they have their mobile phones, but getting them to stand up and face each other to do the speaking activity. This avoided them sort of like just not really looking at each other when they're speaking. So making them do that, I found, was also successful in getting them to speak more. So let's look at some pair work activities. All of you have done loads of pair work activities. What I wanted to look at is some classics and then some twists to maybe give you ideas of what you could do with students in pairs. The first is, obviously there are like questionnaires, right? So I'm sure you've had in your material that the students have to ask each other questions. Here's an example of like 10 questions about the future in English. What are you going to do after class? Do you think you will live in a different place in the next 5 years, etc.? Now, one way you can do this is you just give the students, this is in the book, and they just have to ask each other the questions in pairs. Okay. Another way that I like to do is, when I had something like this, is I would give one of the students the questions and they would have numbers 1 to 10. And then the other student had to call out a number. And then the first student would find the number on the page and then ask the question. So it gave a little bit of kind of control back to each of the students, right? And then they would swap the paper over and the other student would say, okay, number 3. And then, okay, question number 3. So just kind of, just the simple thing of numbering the questions, and then the person who's answering calls out a number and that person who's asking asks that question. It was a really small thing, but I found it kind of gave more agency to both sides in that interaction. Here's another fun activity. Usually when we do questionnaires, it's asking questions, but there's another way of doing it where you give half of a sentence. And here, what you do, here's an examples of conditional sentences in English. For example, if I could travel anywhere in the world, I would go to Japan, for example. But what you do here is you leave off the second part of the question, the second part of the thing, and each student who's working with a partner has to complete this paper silently, thinking of their partner's answers. So if I'm working with Christy, I'm going to write her name at the top of the page, partner's name, Christy. And then I'm going to imagine, I don't talk to her yet. I'm going to say, okay, if I could travel anywhere in the world, I would go to, okay, Australia. If I could speak another language, I would choose to speak, let's see, Chinese, and so on. So I'd fill all of these in, thinking of Christy. And then the pair work activity begins, where I turn to Christy, she turns to me, she's completed it for me, and then I read out the sentence. And then she says, no, wrong, no. If I could go traveling in the world, I would go to Brazil. And I wouldn't learn Chinese, I would learn German, for example. So this is a very simple activity for you to make. You just make half sentences. This is with conditionals. It could be with like your daily activities. every morning for breakfast, I have, I usually go to work by, or whatever. Yeah. My favorite day of the week is, and so on. So they complete it for a partner, and then they don't talk at that stage. They talk afterwards. Colleague and I like to do pictures where we would collect postcards of things and cut out pictures of from the postcards and kind of make up things like that. But then make that into a pair work activity, these simple memory activities where asking students to look at pictures for 15 seconds, try to remember all the things. They turn all of them over and they try to tell a partner, I think that's the apple was there. There was a sofa there. There was a thing. I do this also with a PowerPoint slide where I may have a big picture of several things on the PowerPoint slide. And I say, okay, work with a partner. I'm going to show you this picture for 15 seconds. Quickly tell your partner all the things that you can see. Then I take it away and I say, now talk to your partner, and together, the two of you, write down all the things you remember in English. Yeah. So this kind of thing for vocabulary practice, as Diana was saying. Yes, I really like this for vocabulary practice, but making that into a pair work activity. Remember I said at the beginning of information gap, like the idea of the information gap as a communicative activity. You can have students make their own. So in this case here, they have the numbers. This is from an exercise in the book, but I've done the thing where I say you're each writing down 6 or 7 different numbers, and then you're going to dictate to each other. So that's just a very simple one with numbers, or write down 6 or 7 words connected to whatever, and then dictate. So even these mutual dictations they make their own small little information gap. By the way, I hope I'm not going too quickly. I'm doing lots of activities because I know that I want this to be practical for you, to give you ideas. As I think our colleagues have said, you'll get there's a recording of this, I think, afterwards. So, okay, back to more pictures. These ones are interesting. Here is great if you find pictures a bit similar to the kinds of things that I've got here, which could be about experiences. So you give them the set of pictures together. They have all the pictures turned down, and then they have to turn over a picture and make a question about the experience. So obviously, A, have you ever seen a ghost? Or B, have you ever been to Greece? The other one, G, have you ever made bread? Have you ever whatever? So they use the picture as the prompt. So these are like picture and prompt cards. And then the end of this activity, they put all the pictures face down, and then they turn over the picture and they try to remember what the person said. You have never made bread, right? Or you made bread during the lockdown, didn't you? That kind of a thing. Yeah. So using the cards as memories and prompts. Yeah. Asking people what, so use, instead of questionnaires, just using a picture. Remember we said that pair work is used often for like speaking, right? It can be used for grammar work and activities. I once went to a workshop where it was a whole workshop on making reading more communicative, and it was really interesting. And one was the presenter made us read a small text together, like in partners, like we would take turn reading sentences. So it was really interesting. And so we did that once. It was like a paragraph. And they said, now do it again. And this time, use your voice in different ways. So make some sentences louder, some quieter. And if you take a look at this text here, you can see that you could probably put different emotions in it. Like one could be whispering and the other one could be speaking normally, or one could sound sad, but they just reading it together. And in fact, we were doing this in Spanish. And as a Spanish learner at the time, I found it really good to kind of do it with someone else, because we would also correct each other's pronunciation a little bit. I'd be like, oh, is it that right? And so on. So there we were really doing this. Can I read a bit of it? So here it would be, what are we going to do? Tom asked. And partner, the doctor looked at her. They were in a large room on the first floor of an apartment building. The room was full of old furniture and rubbish. She looked out the window. We need something to eat. Have you got any food? Tom shook his head. Anyway, so students take turns reading little bits and pieces together in pairs. Yeah, I know that often teachers will do things where people around the class will all read, but then there's a long time before someone is reading something, and some people don't like that either, like the performing the big reading out loud. Okay, here is a really interesting one, and this is an idea that I had been working on for a while, ever since I started using kind of PowerPoint and stuff. I'm going to show you here a little clip from a language video, a language learning video. So this is for teaching English. I'm sure you have similar things in your materials, like videos in shops or things like that for them to learn language. Just to give you an idea, take a listen to this.
Excuse me, how much is this blue jacket?
Let me see. It's $150.
Wow, that's expensive. Can I try it on?
Of course. What size are you?
Small, I think.
Okay. The mirror's over there.
Thanks.
Okay, you know what this kind of thing is about learning language for a shop, right? So with the students, I get the students to watch a video like this. If you have videos like this for in your language course books, you can use that. And then,
excuse me.
I get them to do the conversation in pairs, right? So the obvious follow-up to this is now you're going to pretend to be in a shop. Like A is going to be the customer, B is going to be the shop assistant. So far, that's pretty normal. I'm sure all of you have done things like this, like a role play, right? But what is different is that what I always wanted was I wanted to be able to tell the students, now you're in the shop. And when I found that like I could take a picture and make it really big and put it at the front of the classroom and project it, I would often do that. So like we would listen to the thing and then I would project a picture of a shop and I would say, here's the shop. In pairs, you're in this shop. Now practice a conversation. And then I would get two students to come up to the front of the class where they would be standing in front of this. So you could see this as the shop. And then they would do they would perform the role play. So we'd have the big picture of the shop kind of in the front of the classroom to kind of put the pairs into the situation like that. Oops. I had a collection of things like this. I had a big picture of a train station, a big picture of a bank, a big picture of a shop, of a cafe, a restaurant, things like that. So when we did those, I would then put that slide up and I would make the pairs do it at the seat first and then up in front of the class. So this is a very easy thing for you to make. And in fact, I think the website is called, I'll type it into the chat. I think it's called Pexels. But if you look for free stock video in Google, you can even find like an example of like 30 seconds of a shop with like the sound effects and everything like that, and have that playing at the front of the class while they pretend that they're in the shop in the pair work activity. So you get like a 30-second background video thing. Yeah, free pick does pictures. I'm not sure if they do, maybe they do stock video as well. I can't remember what they're, but if you do a search for free stock video, you can find often clips that you could download and then play in the background. Or if you were doing online classes, use it in the online classroom, which brings me to my next point. When I start, obviously lots of these things are great for face-to-face, but when you're all in lockdown or doing online lessons, it was not so easy. Sergio, can you still hear me? You're on, your camera's on. Okay, sorry. So doing pair work online was quite difficult. Now there were two ways that you could do it. If you were using Zoom, you could use like breakout rooms, right? So I want to talk about each of that. But if you weren't using breakout rooms, there's still another way of doing it. And that is an older way that people used to do pair work called open pairs. An open pair thing is like in the classroom where I would say, for example, Jorge, can you ask Sean the question? And then Jorge asks Sean, I say, Sean, now you answer. So you sort of direct, and it's across the classroom. And that's what lots of teachers had been doing as pair work in Zoom rooms. So it'd be like nominating a student and then nominating another student. The other possibility is doing closed pairs in breakout rooms, which is not as easy. I mean, it is possible, but you have to put them in the breakout rooms. Sometimes their connection drops. Sometimes you don't know if they're in there. It's not as easy to see. But let's talk about each of these in turn. The technique of the open pairs, so with everybody in the Zoom room together, is sometimes called the fishbowl technique. And it's used at universities where you have two people, or a small group of people talking and everyone else is listening, and then you swap out the people. So so you nominate two people, they start having their conversation or asking and answering the questions, and then the teacher says, okay, stop. Colin, you're finished. Now I want Susan to come and continue asking the questions. And so you're changed. It's like they're in the fishbowl. And I don't know if you know this, but if you use Zoom and you put your mouse over someone's camera image, there's three little dots. Does anyone know what I'm talking about here? Like there's three little dots over a camera image in Zoom, if you use Zoom. Under that, there are options. So you can mute someone, and etc. But you can also spotlight them. And when you spotlight them, it's like that green or yellow line that appears around their camera. You can see it around mine. And you can do that so that two people, for example, kind of zoom down into the middle of the screen. And then that way they're doing their pair work activity and everyone is watching. And then you could spotlight somebody else to come in and put someone out and bring someone in. So you can do this for pair work activities where they would be only two at a time. So it's not ideal, but it is a way of doing it in open pairs. So you nominate two students to do an open pair activity, like ask and answer the questions. In Zoom, you spotlight them. The students do the activity. The rest of the group watches and is given a task. For example, watch and make a note of 3 furniture words that you hear, or 3 interesting phrases, or whatever. This could be done for discussions where the rest of the group is thinking of their own answers, and then you say, now you stop, someone else is going to come in and answer the question themselves and ask another question, etc. And in breakout rooms, what I like to do for breakout rooms is I don't do them all the time. I don't do as much pair work in online classes I do in face-to-face class, because breakout rooms, I usually save it for bigger tasks. But a breakout room task could be divided into stages. For example, as one of our colleagues, I think Claudia said, importance of clear instructions, even more important in the online classroom. So I set up the task with very clear instructions. Then they go and complete the task in the breakout room. I go and check the breakout rooms while they're doing it. When they come back, I ask them to report on the task. So like give their answers, give the feedback, etc. I give them some feedback. And then we look forward to like, what is the next thing, or what will they do better next time when they go into pairs? Yeah. So someone said, well, I couldn't hear that well. So next time you'll try to get your audio working better, or next time you'll read the instructions more carefully, you'll prepare more, etc. And I wanted to finish with 2 quite simple breakout room tasks if you are teaching online. Can I just check, by the way, are any of you teaching online still at all? And if you are, in what platform are you doing? Zoom, Teams, Meet? Okay, not at the moment. Some yes, some Zoom. Canvas, okay. Zooms, WebEx, okay. Yeah, not right now. Partially with Zoom. Okay, so lots of the other tips are probably useful if you're not doing Zoom. These last 2 activities are good if you are doing Zoom. One is a describe and draw activity. I mean, you can do this in face-to-face, but it works nicely as a breakout room activity. So you make a simple picture with different elements on it. You could do this in the face-to-face classroom. For example, a mountain, the moon, clouds, etc., right? You describe, you do that yourself. You describe the picture and students listen and draw. Yeah. Then if you're doing this all together in the Zoom room, you turn on your cameras and you show the pictures. So people show the different pictures. Usually people will be laughing, oh my gosh, that's a mountain. Oh, it looks like a hill, or it looks like an ice cream cone, or whatever, right? So they compare. Then now we go to the pair work. First of all, students by themselves make their own drawings, including elements from the original. So they include things, vocabulary that you would put into the original, like mountain, river, cloud, tree, whatever it was, yeah? And then in breakout room, they dictate, draw, and compare. So basically, you've done a demonstration of the activity yourself with everybody, then they make their own drawings, very simple drawings, and then they get into the breakout rooms. They have to describe and draw their picture for each other, and then turn on the cameras, show the picture. So they don't have to have the cameras on all the time. They just do it when they're going to show the picture. So that would be them creating their own information gap, as it were. Follow up, I elicit feedback when we all come back into the main Zoom room together, and maybe get some people to share their pictures. If someone said, oh, Juan did a really nice picture here, show us, Juan, show us. And so then he shows the picture, and so on. Another very simple activity for breakout rooms is one where they make you can do this for different things. I did this for telling the time. So I started by dictating 10 times to the class. 10 past 4, 6:30, midnight, 10 to 1, etc. So they write each of these on different individual pieces of paper. I don't have it right here, but they would be like on little individual pieces of paper, little slips, like a Post-it. Then I nominate a student and I say, okay, put your Post-its down so you can't see them. And I'm going to pick up a picture thing. You pick up a Post-it, and I'm going to say, it's 10 past 6 reading my time. What time is it? And you say what's on your Post-it. And then do they match? If they match, we put those to the side. And the idea is you want to try to match all of them. If they don't match, you put them both down, and then they pick up one, I pick up one, they say their time, and so on. So I do a demonstration. Then they go into breakout rooms with their partners. They've got their Post-it notes, 10 of them, 6 if that's too many. And they do ask and answer the questions. What time is it? What time is it? Is it a match? Yes, put those to the side. If it's not a match, put them down, keep going. You could do this with any kind of picture things, pictures of animals, furniture, things that they can draw simply, that they have to then do as a matching activity. So very good for low levels. So, and again, they can do this in the breakout room. You can do this, of course, in the face-to-face classroom as well. I mentioned in the breakout room because it's a kind of thing that lends itself well to that. And I find that with students in the breakout room, when they are showing, when they're showing a little piece of paper to each other like this, it suddenly attracts the attention more. It's like, here, look, sorry, that's because I've got the background screen on, but showing something like that on the screen in the Zoom room, often people sort of lean forward to see what was going on, to sort of read what is being shown to them. Before we go to the Q&A though, because we're almost at the end here, so just 5 minutes, I just wanted to recap the things that we did here. I started off by talking about reasons why we do pair work and reasons why we don't do pair work. I think in some cases, we can overuse pair work. So I don't think we should do pair work all the time for everything, because otherwise students get burnt out. But I do think there are very good reasons to do pair work. I don't usually do pair work with very open things or very personal things at the beginning of a course. I wait for students to get to know each other a bit better. So I do more convergent activities. This is a bit like how the workshop, why maybe teachers don't like it in workshops, is because it's they don't know the person that well in the workshop. They haven't been working together for a while. So I wanted to start with that. Then we looked at the history of a couple of pair work activities in English language teaching, which I think have been used in other foreign language teaching, and sort of the importance of pair work. We looked at different kind of ways of putting students into pairs, what to do with a group of 3, other little tips and hacks on doing pair work, including the speaking stations, facing each other like that. And then I wanted to go over some of my favorite kind of pair work activities, which I think you can easily adapt for your language classrooms, including your online classrooms, making your own information gaps or doing that open pair work fishbowl type stuff. So that is sort of the summary of my talk. And I think now what I'd like to do is I'm going to take 10 seconds to just drink some water. If you have some questions, we have time now, plenty of time for questions.
All right, Lindsay, if it's all right with you, I'd like to start with one of our first questions we got here, if that's okay.
Yep.
All right, great. So Carmen asked, my question is, do you have any suggestions for hybrid situations? When students get COVID, they have to stay home for at least 1 week. They're allowed to be on Zoom while I am physically in the classroom.
So hybrid is also something that was done here in Spain. So in Spain, we had where like they had 2 days of class in face-to-face and then 2 days online, and it would alternate. So you'd have fewer people in the classroom. And I remember being asked a lot of times about like ideas for language. How do we make the language class work in a hybrid thing? And I didn't come up with anything. And because I wasn't sure how long it was going to last. I think again, the hybrid situation, it lends itself, it works okay for lectures, but it doesn't work really that well for language teaching classroom stuff. And so I'm afraid I don't have any really good answers for that. The only things I could think of is that you could occasionally have like people in the classroom interview somebody who's participating from afar, but then you have to make sure that the audio's working. And it's not so much a methodology problem as it becomes a technology problem. It's got to be, the connections have to be good, the audio has to be good, the video, and so on. So if you're just showing you, I'm not really sure with activities, unless it was asking people in there who are at home to do like other tasks that they could feed in. So for example, while you're doing this, the people at home, can you check on the internet for this and find another question to ask people in the classroom and put it in the chat room? And then, so at least they feel like they're getting some attention from me. That's probably what I would try to do. I would get them to feed in things and give questions that I would ask the rest of the class, but it would probably a lot go through me. Sorry, Claudia, I don't have better suggestions, but I'm hoping that hybrid won't be around that long. And if it is, that there's some serious investment in really good technology, because that'll make it easier.
Absolutely. I think even your fishbowl idea too would be a really great circumstance for that.
That's true.
Claire asked, I'm hoping not to have to go back to Zoom, but how do you manage going in and out of breakout rooms? It's so much more complex than just moving through an in-person classroom.
Totally, which is also why I don't do as many pair work activities in the Zoom classroom as I do in the face-to-face classroom. I know some teachers who are really comfortable with it, and they're just like, oh yeah, I just do it all the time. I prefer to do slightly longer ones, which means then I have time to go in to the different breakout rooms and monitor them. Of course, when I go into a breakout room, everybody stops talking. So that's also a problem. It's not like when you're watching pair work in class and you can kind of lurk around the corner. There are 2 other tools, though, that I will recommend that if you wanted to do this kind of stuff and you had the ability, because Zoom is not the only game in town now for teachers. There's been lots of new startups, and one is called Wonder. And Wonder is a video conferencing, and there the breakout rooms are like you're all individual bubbles, and as you drag your bubble, which has your face on it and the video on it, closer to another one, you automatically form a breakout room. And if someone else drags their bubble close, they automatically enter your breakout room. And if they drag their bubble away, they go to another one. So it makes it really easy for mingling, and it means that I can circulate around. And another tool like this is called GatherTown. GatherTown is the same thing, but instead of like little videos, well, your video does turn on, but you move around a little icon, like a little Pokemon person. It looks video gamey, but it is for conferences and stuff like that. And when you move your little guy or a girl into a space, like there are certain spaces which are like the breakout rooms, and if someone else moves into the space with you, both of your cameras turn on. And so then you can be talking, and then if someone else joins, their camera joins that square of cameras and so on. So it's easier to go in and out. So I've done that a bit, but I know not everyone is able to use, they're both free as well at the moment.
That's awesome. I love that. I've never heard of those. So that is
No,
really,
no,
really
they're
cool.
trying to get more attention. I mean, I don't work for either of them. These are ones that I just found. They're trying to get more, like the pandemic. Zoom kind of won the pandemic in terms of like video conference platforms, and so there's loads of people who want to get a part of that.
Definitely.
The second
Carmen,
one, Mary asked me to repeat the second one. Gather Town. I wrote it up there, and Carmen just wrote it there. Gather Town. Yeah.
thank you. Carmen asked, do you have any good suggestions for partner work for B1, B2, and C1 level students?
C1 level students and B2 level students. And also, by the way, I'll answer Hariche's question about Spanish high school teaching in a moment. I'll remember that. I just saw that. C1, B2 level students is often like discussion type things. I like doing kind of discussion puzzles where they have to puzzle something out together. You know, those kind of, lots of them tend to be crime and mystery puzzles, but I'm sure you can find other ones. I'm thinking of the famous one of like, a person is lying in the middle of the desert with a backpack, and you know, an empty glass of water, and how did they die? And they have to kind of like figure that out together. That's a morbid one, but those kinds of like discussion tasks where you have to figure something out together it can be good. I do more elaborate role plays also with higher level. One really good role play that uses your PowerPoint and the screen at the front of the class is you need to find a bunch of photos showing like views outside, like views of a city. And so I do it like whatever city we're living in, I go on Google Maps where you get the street view, and I do screenshots of different views from the airport to the downtown. And then they sit next to each other, and I say, you're in a car and one of you is new here and the other is the host, and you're driving from the airport to the town. And as the pictures change, that's your conversation. So you want to have a conversation describing what you see out the window of the car. And I say, so ready, go. And so they're sitting there and they're like, it's nice weather today. Oh, what's that? Oh, that's the Red Barn. That's like a really famous restaurant we have here in town. Da, 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 da. And then like a minute or two later, I change the slide changes, like, oh, that's nice. Is that a church? Yeah, that's the whatever church. Da, da, da. That's the biggest church in our state, or whatever it is. Yeah.
I love how practical your ideas are. These could be used in like, these are great Friday lessons, people. I hope we're taking notes.
Yeah. So yeah, that one of like the driving into a thing, or you find a bunch of pictures in a different departments of a department store, and then the students work in pairs. They stand up in pairs and like, you're shopping for a present. I'm going to show you on the PowerPoint. You're going into different departments. Talk to your partner about what gift ideas. And so like there's a clothes department, a toy department, and something like that. And so they're having conversation, but it really helps them move it along.
Yeah, I love that, because I know personally when I had students speak in pairs, they would run out of stuff to say, and I'd be like, keep talking. So giving them that prompt of something new to talk about, I think is really a great idea. I love that. Lenmilla asked, do you use pair work every class or as often as possible? What's the frequency recommendation?
Face-to-face every class, but not for every activity. So I use what I call the heads up, heads down, heads together when I'm planning lessons. So if you use too much of any one of those, the lesson can become boring or stressful. So if your lesson is all heads up, that means that all you're doing is the students are just listening and you're talking the whole time. If the lesson is all heads down, that's like an exam. They're just all writing an exam. And if lessons all heads together, that's students just talking to each other the whole time, and then they'll be tired and they'll have wanted a bit more like teacher input. So I try to balance all of those things. Certainly earlier on in a course, I might do a little bit more pair work just to let the students know that that's what they should expect, that they do have to talk to each other. Because I still get students that think, I'm not learning anything from Jose here. I just want to speak to the teacher because the teacher knows and my partner doesn't know anything. But
Great.
I try to rectify that.
Yeah, for sure. An anonymous attendee asked, do you think it's better to let students choose their partners or to randomly randomly assign partners?
Depends on the group, I guess, and maybe the age group especially, right? Like if I'm teaching a group of 13-year-olds, no way they get to choose their partners at the beginning, because otherwise, there's going to be cliques that'll form and stuff like that. So I try to move them around as much as possible. With adults, it kind of depends on the group. I do like the idea of randomly assigning them just because it leads to some fun activities, the post-its under the chair or putting the names together or the playing cards. Those are kind of fun, memorable activities for the students that enjoy doing that. So they don't think that they're getting into pairs, they think that they're playing a game or something like that. So I personally like the random. They often talk about putting the weaker students with the stronger students. That's fine, but you never exactly have an even number of weak and an even number of strong. So you're always sort of like, there's maybe one or two students that you're worried about, but I don't do that for like everything.
Yeah, and what a good authentic activity too. How many times are we placed with random people we don't know and we have
Well,
to
yeah,
so,
that's also true. It's a good life skill.
right.
I wanted to address something that someone wrote in the chat here. They
Absolutely.
wanted, the fishbowl example. They wanted another example of the fishbowl.
Yes, a Spanish 1 high school teacher had asked if you could explain the fishbowl activity a little bit better using specific unit examples.
Okay, so let's do it with a discussion. For example, imagine discussion is you have to talk about the benefits and drawbacks of free public transportation. I can't think of any drawbacks for that. Okay, the benefits and drawbacks of, I don't know, wearing school uniforms. I'm just trying to think of something like that. Okay, so you nominate two students. They're going to come and sit in the middle of the classroom. Everyone is sitting around. The task everyone else has to is think of their own reasons. And then those two students start having the conversation. So you kind of, maybe you join in at the beginning and everyone's watching. And then at a certain point you say, okay, thank you, Raul. Now you go and join the group. Someone else come in and continue the conversation. You give your things. Keep talking to Claudia. Another couple of minutes. Claudia, now you go and sit down and someone else is going to come into the fishbowl. So like there's two people who are in there and you're kind of swapping them out. So one person's coming out. They could be having a discussion about something, or they could just be working through the questions, like have a conversation, find out about each other's weekend, what you did, where you went, and so on. And then you swap them in and out. Hope that makes it clearer.
That's great. Thank you. Claire wants to know if you have any other ideas on non-threatening sorts of questions for paired work at the beginning of a course.
Okay, so so I think, for example, threatening types of questions are things like, how old are you? How many people are in your family? Can be, if you have no idea, like, where's your, like, I'm thinking if I was teaching newcomers to a country, refugees, things like that, that could be, so personal stuff I tend to steer away from. Things like listing things, like come up with a list of 5 types of food, 5 lists of things. Other kinds of questions is like the really non-threatening ones would just be language lists of things, like name 5 this, 5 whatever. Other I'm trying to think of other kinds of things. Well, anything that's not really that personal. So you could talk about favorites of things is usually okay. Things that you like, things that you don't like so much, but like on safe topics like food or not so much life. I tend to avoid life things right at the very beginning. So avoiding like past stuff until I know them a bit better and they know each other a bit better. So talking about favorites, talking about neutral things that have been in the news. Talk about a television show that you saw recently that you liked. Talk about some things that are nice things and not too personal or go into kind of potentially sensitive areas.
Great. Yolani wants to know, what do you think of speed meetings or speed dating, and do you have any new suggestions?
So the speed dating technique is what I was talking about before, about the two circles, where you have the circle of chairs in the middle and the circle of chairs on the outside. And if you are able to move your chairs around and get that set up like that, that's really cool. I really like that. And that usually is, they usually, like, what I do for that technique is that all the people on the inside circle, each of them have a different question. Right. So let's imagine we were doing questions about the past tense, or experiences, like, what's the best book you've read? What's the longest bus ride you've ever taken? What's the furthest country you've ever been to? What's the strangest food you've ever eaten? Each person on the inside circle has a different question. And so they always ask the same question over and over again, and then the other person on the outside circle goes around it. And I really like those activities. I think they're good for like small bits of language, not for long discussions, but small bits of language. Yeah, really nice.
That's great. Alfredo wants to know, is there a site or books where we can find more exercises about pair work, excuse me.
I don't know of a book that's specifically about pair work, a modern one anyway. There were some in the 1970s, like the ones that I showed there, that have like had the student A and student B, and those were really interesting and really good. I haven't seen anything, an activity book of pair work like that. I think the best thing would be to look at the pair work activities in your books, but if you're teaching like Spanish or German and you can get your hands on an English language course book, often at the end, at the back pages, they have a whole bunch of pair work activity things. So just kind of flip to the back, so they've got student A and student B. That'll give you ideas for other ones.
Yes, if I may, I would say that Clut World language books have excellent suggestions on how to do paired work and partnered work. And especially since all of our books are a communicative approach, that is an excellent way for you to get started on that kind of an idea.
Perfect. I teed that up nicely for you.
Yes, I know. That was a real softball for me.
Yeah.
We have another question. Someone said, is this year I started using markers and coloring books for adults, new thing, or magnets with the idea of keeping focus somewhat diverted from grammar. I posed questions for each class and we talked for about 20 minutes. I lowered expectations for second language learners by talking about how it is common to understand before you can express things verbally. By diverting their attention from thinking about language to the motor skills, conversations ended up being great and more authentic. And heritage speakers maintain conversations. Second language learners chime in when they can. They get to know each other in ways that form trust. Do you have any other activities that are similar to that you really like?
Yes, if we're talking about using like physical aids of stuff like that, and like things that you can manipulate while you're speaking to help you with the speaking, and you were talking about magnets and coloring, there was something that was used in English language teaching that made like a whole method on it, and I'll write it what it was called there, Cuisenaire rods. So the Cuisenaire rods are little wooden sticks of different colors, and they were used for like algebra and in math teaching. You can find them probably in a craft shop or something like that, but they are so versatile for like language exercises. So you can do them to make comparatives, you can do them to describe a group of people, a family, things like you can, they're just so nice and tactile that you can, and they're all different sizes. So there's like some big black ones and then red ones and so on and so forth, and you can use it to sort of like design a street plan or a house, or use these to represent members of a family, or all different kinds of things. So I find that that's another one.
That's great. Someone asked, do you have any tips to increase attendance for students who skip classes to avoid paired work?
Well, I suppose there's the carrot ways, where you try to make as many fun pair work and fun type activities so that they feel like they're missing out. And there's the stick, which is if you're I don't know. I mean, if it depends on your language courses where you are. If you in some places where I'm teaching, you have to have a certain amount of participation, so you can't skip a class. And some of them, they have like a participation mark. So like 20% of your mark is your participation in class. It'll depend on your own context and your own teaching. I find that the intrinsic motivation of wanting to come to class because you had a really fun time with the other students is the strongest one. So work on finding activities that they like, that they might not want to skip. And also think about if they are missing the pair work, is it because they don't want to be with a certain person? Is it because they felt too threatened? Are they being put in a tricky situation? Give much safer pair work activities for them. Try to find a role where somebody can just be like, for example, the easy pair work thing, the easier role is the person who has the piece of paper asking the questions and the other person has the harder thing. So give the really challenged student, you just read the questions and so on. Yeah.
That's great. I think we are nearing the end of our questions. So if anyone else has anything else, you can throw it in the chat. But otherwise, I think this was a really fantastic presentation. And before anyone goes, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Kamala, because she's going to talk about some of our amazing events that are coming up, as well as, I believe, give us a survey. So that way we can talk about how fantastic Lindsay was.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Christy. Thank you, Lindsay, for that wonderful presentation. And yeah, so just to finish this off, we will be putting a PowerPoint slides for this presentation in the chat. So feel free to take advantage of those. We will also be including that in our email that we will be sending out. Thank you for participating. And it will also include a survey that you can fill out and give us feedback so that we know how to keep improving and to see what we can always be doing to get better and to bring you the presentations that you want to hear. And so, yes. As far as our exciting events to come, we have a couple more webinars coming up this month. I will have my colleagues put those in the chat for you. But here, let me find it quick. We will be having 2 different webinars coming up. The next session by presenter Florencia Henshaw, titled Unpacking Output, Why, When, and How. And so that's an exciting one coming May 12th. And so there should be Eventbrite put in the chat that you can follow to sign up for that one. And then some more to come. We also are very excited to announce that Clever Languages will be doing a conference this October 1st and 2nd. So be on the lookout. We will be sending out a save the date for that. We will have some speakers and workshops for you all, and we are very excited for that. So those are our big updates. Thank you again so much for coming. We have these for you, and we want to make sure that we can continue to bring you good quality presentations in the future. And thank you so much, Lindsay, for that presentation again.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you to my colleagues for hosting tonight's event. I hope you all have a good evening, and we'll see you next time.